Muses of Mythology is a spoiler-heavy podcast.
That's an understatement.
We're going to discuss not just the events of this book, but the Rhineverse as a whole, and really anything that we feel is relevant. You can find full spoiler warnings in the show notes.
I haven't been able to sit down and play fucking any story-based game recently, which is really rough.
You know what? I've been there. It's okay, D.
Yeah.
You just gotta absorb what you can absorb.
Yeah, well, you play games differently than I do.
Well, no, I meant
No,
I
I know,
haven't
I
been
know.
able to do any writing recently, but I've been doing a lot of reading. You're not able to play the kind, but you're still doing the activity that brings you joy.
Yeah.
I was being supportive, you bitch!
Welcome to Muse of Mythology, a podcast where we explore how ancient myths become part of modern pop culture through the lens of Rick Riordan's Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. This is Story 87, Baldr. I'm your co-host and podcasting muse, Darien Smart. Joining me is my co-host and brother, DJ.
How's everybody doing today? DJ the Muse, and just having a good time today.
Yeah, really?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad to hear that.
Very fried.
Aw,
Tired.
D.
My back hurts. I guess I'm not really having a good time, but
Oh,
I'm having
the truth comes
as
out.
good as a time as I can.
Well, I'm very excited to tell you all about Baldr.
I'm excited to hear it.
But first, let's muse around the garden for a moment.
All right.
Hey, DJ.
What's up?
You'll never guess what I found.
Is it another patron?
No, it's a bunch of really nice comments from listeners.
Oh!
Yeah, so...
Have they just been building up and we couldn't find them?
Yes. Now, okay, half yes, because if you listen on Spotify, at the bottom of every episode, or like on the page where you can listen, there will be a prompt. A question will ask you, what did you think of this episode? And listeners can respond to that.
That's a thing on Spotify?
It is a thing on Spotify for podcasts, yes. Now,
I've never seen that.
it is something that I'm very familiar with because one of the other podcasts I do, Aragon and Back Again, we use Spotify for podcasters as the RSS platform.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use that, you can actually edit when you're uploading the episode, every one of those questions. So at the end of our episodes, we always have some sort of prompt related to the discussion of the chapter that we invite listeners to engage with. And those, I always get an email, hey, someone responded to that. And I can go in, I can log in, and I can see it.
Yeah.
I was getting those same emails for when someone would respond to a Muse's question. But because I don't use the Spotify podcasters for the Muse's RSS feed, we use Buzzsprout, that I didn't know how to see them. Right? Because I
Yeah.
don't have a login that is for
The Muses.
the Muses one through that. I have my personal one, and then I have that one, and then we're on Spotify because Buzzsprout puts us on Spotify.
Yeah.
So recently, and this is a long story, I'm so sorry. I'm just explaining to all of our dear listeners who left these nice comments and why we didn't touch them for months and months.
Because we didn't know about them, apparently.
I couldn't get to them because they're also, when someone leaves a comment, the podcast has to publish them.
Uh-huh.
They are hidden until they are set to public.
Okay.
So I couldn't just view our page and see comments that had been left. Until recently, Spotify decided that instead of having a separate login account for Spotify for podcasters, you needed to link it to a Spotify account. Which means, so I had to link the Aragon podcast to my Spotify account, and then somehow that also resulted in it bringing up Muses of Mythology on the
Great.
same
Awesome.
account.
Hey, awesome.
So now, literally today,
Absolutely cherry.
for the first time, I was able to go and see Muses on the list of podcasts I do on that one, click it, and actually view all of the comments. And I could also go in and individually edit the question prompt. I'm not going to do that. That's one extra step. That's not inherent framing. Just tell us what you liked. That's fine, dear
Yeah.
Spotify listeners. But, like I said, we have quite a few comments. So that all backstory is for me now being able to share a little bit of these comments.
Awesome.
From one, we recently released one of the Patreon bonus episodes of the main feed. I believe it was our Hercules one. Nico, 4 months ago, shocked by the fact that DJ's name is Davis.
What do you want from me? It's what I was born with, and I love my name. It's great.
Yeah, dear listeners, you may not know this if you have never listened to the Patreon. DJ doesn't actually go by DJ.
No, it's almost exclusively Dad and that part of the family, and Darien.
Yeah. I didn't know that
And
until
then
we
Darien's
started.
friends.
Yes.
Everybody that's learned about me through Darien calls me DJ.
Because I call him DJ when referring to him. And so when we started the podcast, that's when I learned that fact. And here, I want this on the record. I did ask, would you prefer I call you Davis?
That doesn't matter to me.
No. So, but Yeah, so dear listeners, you could call him DJ. It's fine.
That's a funny. It's funny to be because I've seen people with the name Deejay for their name. So
Yeah.
maybe that's what people were just thinking in their
Probably,
head, and
yeah.
not the initials of my name.
Yeah, because why? On our Pandora episode with Quinn Alberts, Amelia said that they love Hope is a Thing with Feathers. It's such a good poem. I'd forgotten we talked about that on that episode, and that makes me happy to remember.
Awesome.
Thanks, Amelia. On a different episode, Oh My Gods, They Were Roommates, with Megs Peterson, Amelia says again, fine, I'll reread Song of Achilles. I love this book with every fiber of my being.
Nice.
Hey, great news. Me too, Amelia. I finally read it.
Congratulations. I have not.
You will eventually. I do
Eventually,
think
I'll get around to it.
but
I've
we
heard
did-
good things about it.
Yeah, talked about it actually over on Patreon for June for Pride.
$10. It's the Remyth
It's the
episode.
Remyth episode for June for Pride. I talked
Yeah.
about Song of Achilles with friend of the show, Dalton Montgomery, so
Mm-hmm.
hey! I finally did it after, oh my goodness, a year
A long
after that
time.
episode came out.
Long time.
Jalori said that on our first episode about the Magnus Chase books. Magnus Chase is probably my favorite Ryanverse series. It has incredible representation, and I love him as a protagonist.
Magnus Chase is a great protagonist. Big
Yeah.
fan of it. Big
He's-
fan of the Magnus Chase series.
he's a
Trials of Apollos
good
is better.
Boy. And then last one I have on our episode of 9 from the 9 Worlds, Ghost Busting 33. The link up to Mr. Mosby was great. I don't know much about Boston aside from the show, LOL, so I immediately went, it's also in Boston! So at that moment of like, oh wait, they're in Boston! So
That was fun.
thank you so much, I feel seen.
Great.
That's what I have for that. Thank you, listeners, for leaving comments. Sorry we haven't shouted you out or published them sooner.
We couldn't get asked us about.
Didn't know how to get to them, but now we will. So if you listen on Spotify, feel free to leave us a comment. It makes me it made me really happy to see.
But there were.
It was like putting on a winter jacket and reaching in and finding a $10 bill. Like,
It was
hey,
awesome.
how nice.
It's great. We do, because it's a new month,
It is.
have a donation to make.
We do.
Yep. We're going to be donating to ReadWorks.
ReadWorks. DJ, what's ReadWorks?
ReadWorks is an organization committed to helping solve America's reading comprehension crisis and student achievement gap. Driven by the scientific study of reading, ReadWorks creates proven high-quality content, teacher guidance, and integrated tools that improve teacher effectiveness and student achievement. They pretty much help with, well...
Providing schools with the resources to give their kids proper reading comprehension skills?
Absolutely.
Fantastic!
Yeah, it's wonderful.
Sounds great.
They seem like they are doing a lot to help out their different... to help out the students and communities that they are
Operating in?
operating in.
Dear listeners, you're probably aware every month we donate $1 for every patron we have over on Patreon to organizations like ReadWorks that are doing a net good in the world.
Yes.
And we currently have 11 patrons, and so we thank each and every patron for helping making these donations possible. If you, dear listener, want to help us be able to contribute more to positive organizations, or just want to, hey, listen to that Song of Achilles episode I mentioned a little while ago, you can swing by
And a ton more content, too.
Yep, you can swing by patreon.com/Muses of Mythology.
And now back to the show.
DJ,
What's up?
you may remember our last episode.
Yes.
I would hope you do.
Yep, about hell.
When we talked about hell, yes. And you may remember that I left a pin in that episode.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
About
taking...
Baldr.
About Baldr. I'm taking that pin out now. In fact, we could have said it was a pin made of mistletoe if we wanted to, which we didn't. That'd be a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
So now we are...
That'd be the only way to hang Baldr out.
Yeah. So now we will discuss Baldr, the god who was not evil, nor died of illness or old age, and yet still ended up in hell.
Yep.
Throwing the whole concept and everything Snorri said into question. But what else is new?
Yeah, who knows? It's Norse mythology.
Yeah. You, dear listeners, you know by now. So, DJ, what do you know about Baldr?
I know when he was born, he was destined to die.
Mm-hmm. As most things are,
Yep.
you could say.
Yep, but this one was like specifically prophesized to die. Frigg didn't like that, got
Nope.
promises from everything in the known universe,
Mhm.
except for mistletoe. Completely forgot about it, thought it was harmless.
Mhm.
Maybe, I don't know. Depends on what story you want to go with,
Let's circle back.
what iteration. And everyone was having a jovial time, just throwing shit at this guy.
Mhm.
And Loki fashioned a spear, a dart, an arrow,
Ooh.
something of the sort out of mistletoe because he
Some
found
sort of
out that's what
pointy
was missed.
projectile.
Yep, he found out that's what was missed. Gave it to Baldur's blind brother
Mhm.
and had him throw it at it, and Baldur died.
Yep.
And
Instantly.
that what Darren's been talking about has kind of kicked off the events of Ragnarok.
Who's to say? Who's to say?
Yeah,
That. What do you remember about Baldur in the Magnus Chase books?
he was mentioned.
He was in fact mentioned, and then
He was in the 9 from the 9.
he is in 9 from the 9
That's right.
worlds.
That's right.
Yep, it is of all the major, like unequivocally major elements of Norse mythology, Baldur does not make an appearance in the Magnus trilogy.
No,
Which
he's
Just did not, aside from like being mentioned what Loki had done and being mentioned when we see Frigg, clearly just didn't fit into the plot. And I respect Riordan for not trying to shove him in there just to check a box.
yeah.
But DJ, we talked about this a bit last time because we like
Yeah, because the hell was
TJ.
it?
Yeah. But what do you remember? What can you draw about when we met?
He was a good dude.
Mhm.
He has the mistletoe arrow
Mhm.
just with him.
Yeah.
It's constantly spawning inside his chest if he loses it.
Yeah.
And so he digs around in the corpse of, I can't remember what.
Garm.
Or no, not the corpse, just like in Garm's mouth
Yeah.
to get it back out.
Mhm.
It's like, yeah, I just don't like it in myself. It's a pain
I'd
to
rather
get
just
out.
carry it.
I'd rather just try to get it and carry it around.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want it to just appear in my chest again. So
Yep.
there's a dude in surprisingly high spirits for where he was.
Yeah. Yeah. Just chill. When TJ ends up, he's like walking around hell trying to find, he's in Helheim trying to find the missing hellhound. And then there's a ghost who just keeps poking him.
Yeah.
It poked me repeatedly with something prickly. Listen, pal, I snapped, turning to confront him. I don't know what your deal is, but, my voice died when I saw who'd been irritating me. The god Baldr, the son of Odin and Frigg. Baldr had been greatly beloved and, supposedly, invulnerable to all forms of attack. But he had one weakness, mistletoe. Loki had tricked Baldr's blind brother, Hod, into killing Baldr with the mistletoe arrow. The same arrow he was now jabbing me with. Hi, I said. Anytime you want to stop doing that is fine by me. Baldr smiled, and I suddenly understood why the world had mourned his death. Young and handsome, with a mop of dark brown hair, sparkling blue eyes, and killer dimples on either side of his impish smile, Baldr radiated warmth and good humor. Being near him made me feel happy. Plain and simple as that. Hi, you're Tyr's kid, right? And he just admits that he just didn't think he was real, and that's why he was just following around poking him. And that's just a wild thing to do.
It's funny.
Yep. DJ asks if Baldr will help him, like, capture Garm. And Baldr's like, oh, no, that would piss hell off. Like, I can't actually help you. But when TJ asks for the arrow, he does give him the mistletoe arrow because we talked about this in the 9 from the 9 episode. TJ realizes mistletoe is toxic to dogs. I mean, it's toxic to most things. It's a poisonous plant. Fungus? Plant.
Mistletoe?
Mistletoe.
It's a plant.
Plant. It's toxic. And he's like,
I
okay,
don't
if I
think it's
can...
a fungus. It's like a plant with berries on it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, we hang it up. That doesn't look like a fungus in like any depiction I've seen of it.
Yeah. Anyway, TJ is like, well, if we can get the mistletoe into the dog's mouth, it'll get it a little bit loopy enough for that it won't attack me when I capture it. And the plan works.
Woo!
As you mentioned, DJ, Baldr constantly carries around the mistletoe arrow. Whenever he tries to get rid of it, it just shows up in his chest. So we have this kind of metaphor for accepting a burden and a weakness rather than trying to ignore it, because by ignoring it, it's just gonna become more of a hindrance than if you just, accept it and embrace it.
Yeah.
DJ, would you be surprised to know that Baldr does not, in fact, constantly have a mistletoe, arrow, dart, spear with him when he's in hell?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I figured.
Yeah. That's just a,
That's a Riordan special.
That's a Riordan special, because we do have to remember that one of the primary purposes of these texts, much like how Snorri really, really wanted you to write Icelandic poetry, Rick Riordan really wants middle schoolers to learn mythology.
Yeah, that's all he wants.
So,
Get an interest in it. It's
Yeah.
fun. I'm sure there are a ton of like Greek scholars that are like are our age that are either in college now or have graduated, and I'm like, I read those books.
Yeah,
They're awesome.
they're great. And if you've got a kid who has to take a test on Norse mythology and they read this and they're trying to remember what killed Baldr or what the god Baldr is associated with, and they remember, well, he carried on a mistletoe arrow. Maybe it was mistletoe.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think we as like readers and podcasters might sometimes give Riordan a little bit more grief on leaning into certain elements in like an over the top, like Baldr doesn't need to have the arrow. Like it's useful here because it does work in the plot, right? But like that's kind of silly. But
arguably,
he
died with it.
He did die with it. So him now it appearing in his chest all the time, buck wild.
Yeah, it's
great. But I'm not mad about that.
But here's the thing, right? I'm sure TJ's bayonet would appear next to him in bed because he died. Not bayonet, just like his rifle.
His rifle with bayonet is a gift from his father.
I thought the bayonet was a gift from the rifle. The rifle is the weapon he had when he died. The bayonet's the gift from the father.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
But it is also a gift. He might have even gotten it in life.
Yeah.
Right? I don't remember. But I'm sure like if he loses it and he wakes up the next day, it's going to be next to him, right?
Yeah.
And that's because he's in hell, or he's in
Valhalla,
right? So he doesn't get the punishment of actually the weapon that killed you is what appears with you, and that appears where it killed you.
It is very following ghost rules. Like you'll often find a ghost in a lot of the folk tales and the stories will embody or like their physical attribute will be the thing that killed them in life.
Yeah.
So for sure, let's talk about Baldr. This time, we're gonna start with Snorri. We're gonna start with Snorri.
Woo!
Because Snorri gives us an excellent rundown for who this dude is.
Nice.
We've literally got chapter 22, Baldr. Gangleri, who again, this is from the Gylfaginning, and that it. I imagine if someone is binging these, it's probably really annoying to hear 3 episodes in a row with me explaining what this specific poem is, but it's also been 2 weeks since the last episode came out, so I think it's fair. Or it's me trying to teach you about these poems, and if you hear it often enough, maybe you'll remember it for a test. I don't know why you're listening to this if you're someone in school taking tests. This podcast is rated E for explicit.
Yes.
So the show isn't for kids, which we only mention so you babies out there know how cool you are for listening. Then Gangleri said, I would like to hear about the other Aesir. Hai said, Odin's second son is Baldr, and there is much good to tell about him. He is the best, and all praise him. He is so beautiful and so bright that light shines from him. One plant is so white that is likened to Baldur's brow. And reference, there's a plant named after Baldr. That's what it is. It is the whitest of all plants, and from this you can judge the beauty of both his hair and body. He is the wisest of gods. He is also the most beautifully spoken and the most merciful. But one of his characteristics is that none of his decisions is effective. He lives at a palace called Breidablik. It is in heaven, and no impurity may be there. And then we have a line from the Lay of Grimir. Breidablik, it is called, where Baldr has made himself a hall, in that land where I know there are fewest perils.
Nice.
So, what we get from that, Baldur's just like a great dude.
Baldur's a great dude, but he doesn't seem to be able to influence anything.
Right, because DJ, what was he the god of? Yeah.
I just looked at the God of War wiki for him, and he's got a lot of aliases like God of Light, God of Mercy, God of like a bunch of like real good, warm, fuzzy shit, and then like
positive things.
In the game he's not that.
Yeah. But in that, where we get the layout of all the things, really, it's like, yeah, he's beautiful and so good, right? And very wise and articulate. But beyond that, there's nothing super specific about anything Baldr has done. And compare that to the previous chapter in the Gylfaginning, where it talks about Thor and how Thor is called Thor of the Aesir or Thor the Charioteer, and the weapons he does, how he fights the frost giants and the mountain giants, how he defends Midgard. This is not Thor's episode, but just as like the comparison, in this previous one, we do have like a very clear rundown of
what Thor actually does.
Whereas Baldur is just vibes, though. Like, just all good vibes.
Yeah.
We're always invite Baldur to things. It's just going to be a good time. And that's fair, because Baldur's function in the literature isn't necessarily to do things. It's just to be sad that he's gone. Snorri gives us the rundown of specifically like who Baldr is, but elements of Baldur's story is what we're mostly going to find over in the Poetic Eddas. We know he is a Aesir, son of Odin, who will die. And in the Sibyl sayings, she sees his death. And additionally, as we discussed in the Ragnarok episode, sees Baldr and his brother returning from hell after Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm.
And we've talked a lot about the Sibyl sayings, the Sibyl's prophecies. So I'm not, and I know I've cited those verses in previous episodes, and we're going to skip them for now because I want to not skip them. They are important, but I really want to talk about a poem in the Poetic Edda that we haven't gotten to talk about yet.
Okay.
The title of which translates to Loki's quarrel.
Okay.
DJ, this is the flighting that's mentioned in the Magnus books.
It's actually written down?
Yeah. The whole thing, DJ.
We got access to the whole ass flighting?
DJ, the whole thing. And everyone's here. DJ, everyone is here. Oh my gosh, so many guys.
That's nuts. That's actually crazy. I thought it was just like a one stanza of like, yeah, he did this and everybody was mad.
Mm-hmm. No, this is like... compared to like how much we have to scrap for other things, this is maybe next to Ragnarok the biggest deal.
We didn't get a name for the goddamn eagle, dude.
The eagle doesn't have a name, but Loki's flighting has an entire poem,
great,
and it's a chunky beast of a poem.
That's a lot of fun.
I'll give you some groundwork. So essentially, the Aesir are having a party. Okay. Loki is not invited to the party because this is past. They used to be super tight. He and Odin and Thor, right? They used to be like tight.
Yeah.
They're not tight anymore, right? They don't hang out anymore. So Loki was not invited to the party, but he does show up and he's like, hey, you gotta let me in because remember when we used to be friends. So Odin goes ahead and lets him in. And Loki just starts insulting people left and right. Just for funsies.
What an asshole.
So he's just throwing insults at everybody, right? And then Frigg speaks up and she's basically like, you know, shut your mouth and stuff. Remember the fates. And he shoots back at her being like, be silent, Frigg. You're Frignor's daughter and you've always been mad. V and Vili, Vidier's wife, and you took them both in your embrace. So just being a dick.
Just rude, dude.
Yeah, just rude, accusing her of sleeping around. To which Frigg counters, you know that if I had here in Aesir's hall a boy like my son Baldr, you wouldn't get away from the Aesir sons. They'd be furious fighting against you. To which Loki says, Frigg, you want me to say more about my wicked deeds, for I brought it about that you will never again see Baldr ride to these halls.
Wait, I thought he was chained up for what he did to Baldr. He was chained up for this flighting?
Well, so... And then Freya jumps in and is like, hey, shut your mouth, Loki. I bet you're not saying anything Frigg already doesn't know. Then Loki goes after her. And it goes around until Thor shows up and Loki decides, oh, gotta go. Ooh. After this is when the Aesir all get together and chain him up.
That's funny.
Because... as mentioned in, I'm realizing now I actually should have recited the thing from the Seir's prophecy, because specifically she says that she sees Baldr dying, and when Odin asks who is responsible for this, she says Hod is responsible for the death. And then in this poem, we have Loki claiming, I was the one who brought it about that Baldr died.
So maybe nobody knew until right then.
So maybe nobody knew until right here.
It was you motherfucker!
Yeah. And that's when they're like, oh, we need to kill that guy. We need to punish that guy.
We didn't blame Hod. Dude was blind and he was just throwing something he found, okay?
They did kill him.
Oh, okay. Poor guy.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
I
think I would rather die than what happened to Loki.
In the poem Baldur's Dreams, which, like I said in the last episode, not one of the Poetic Eddas, but a poem we still have nonetheless and is awesome. That's the one where Odin goes to hell and is like, hey, because this is where Baldr is having these nightmares that he's going to die. And everyone is really distressed about this. Like, this is really weird.
Yeah.
So he goes to hell, resurrects a seer, and asks her some questions. And he learns that Hod will be the one that will kill Baldr. And then he encourages her to like, well, who will achieve vengeance on Hod for his wickedness? Who will bring Baldr's killer to the funeral pile? Rind will give birth to Valley in Western Halls. Odin's son will fight when 1 night old. He won't wash his hands nor comb his hair until he brought to the pyre Baldr's enemy. Reluctantly I told you, now I will be silent. So that's what has him. Like, what happened to Hod? Well, one of Odin's other sons kills him in vengeance of Baldr.
Yeah.
So because that gives us like from the Aesir, Hod killed Baldr.
Yeah.
And so that's how we know they don't know that Loki was involved until the flighting, where Loki decides he's going to boast about it. Things take a turn.
That's funny.
But those are the elements of the poem we have, which leads us to wondering, okay, well then how did that happen? Where do we get the details of the story? Where if Hod killed Baldr, but Loki is responsible for Baldr's death, where does that come from? Well, once again, we have Snorri to thank for filling in the gaps. Also in the Gylfaginning, we've got a section 49, The Death of Baldr and Hermod's Ride to Hell. And what I really like about this is the previous chapter is again about Thor. And it describes a bunch of Thor's like great deeds and heroic accomplishments and things like that. And then Gilmiri asks, is there more to be told about the Aesir? Thor accomplished a great feat on that journey. Hai replied, one could tell of an event that the Aesir themselves thought more important. The origin of this saga was that Baldr the Good had a series of ominous dreams. He saw his life threatened. So this one, Baldr goes, he tells the other Aesir, hey, I've been having these like weird dreams. And the Aesir all get together and they agree like, okay, well, we aren't going to let Baldr to die. We're all huge Baldr fans. So they all take an oath. We're not going to harm Baldr.
Yeah.
And then they send Frigg to go get oaths from everything else in all of the worlds, right? Frigg took oaths that Baldr would not be harmed by fire and water, iron and all kinds of metals, stone, the earth, trees, diseases, animals, birds, poisons, and snakes. When this was done and had become known, Baldr and the Aesir took to amusing themselves by having Baldr stand in front of all the others at the assembly, while some would shoot him, some would strike blows, and some would hit him with stones. Whatever was done caused him no injury, and all thought this was remarkable. And
this is a good time.
That's a good. It's just everyone's like, this is just a great time. I'm having a grand old fucking time with this. But Loki, son of Laufey, saw this and it angered him that Baldr was uninjured, because Loki's, I'm assuming, an insecure, jealous dick.
Loki's just sadistic. He likes seeing pain. He doesn't like it when nobody's have pain.
Or he doesn't like that Baldr's getting all of this attention for something that he didn't actually do.
Yeah.
It was the Aesir and Frigg who did all the work to gain him this invulnerability. So Loki disguises himself as a woman and then goes to Frigg, and he says, and she asks this woman, like, hey, do you know what the Aesir are doing? And she tells him, yeah, everyone's shooting at Baldr, but like, he's not getting hurt? And that's when Frigg says, oh, yeah, like, I did that. Neither weapons nor wood will harm Baldr. I have received oaths from all of them. Then the woman asks, have all things given their oath not to harm Baldr? Frigg answers, a shoot of woods grows to the west of Valhalla. It is called mistletoe, and it seemed too young for me to demand its oath.
Okay.
So at this information, we get the rest of the story. As you said, Loki gets the mistletoe, goes to Hod. He's like, hey, why are you throwing things at your brother? And he's like, I'm blind and I can't see. And Loki's like, don't worry, I will help you aim. You should be behaving like the others, honoring Baldr as they do. I'll direct you to where he is. Shoot this twig at him. So actually, he doesn't even craft it into anything. He just breaks the mistletoe off and brings it to Hod.
Just throw it.
Just chuck it. And so he does. He throws it. The shot went right through Baldr, who fell to the ground dead. The misfortune was the worst that had worked against gods and men. Baldr's death left the gods speechless and so weak they were unable to muster the strength to lift him into his arms. They all looked at one another, and all were of a single mind against the one who had done the killing. But no one could take vengeance because the place was so deeply revered as a sanctuary. Basically, they couldn't get vengeance right there because, like, you can't.
Yeah.
So they had to leave. But also, like,
There's no business to be allowed in the Continental.
Yeah, like, when the first AC...
Took you a second.
I just wasn't prepared! But yeah,
No business is allowed to be in the Continental. Absolutely, DJ. Spot the fuck on. When the Aesir first tried to speak, all they could do was weep. No one could form the words to tell others of his grief. Odin suffered the most from this misfortune. It was because he understood most how grievously was the loss, that the death of Baldur was ruin for the Aesir. That being, as we've discussed, Baldur's death sets off Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And the end of all things, including, like, all of the Aesir.
Nice.
Yeah. So it truly is, yeah. They throw a huge funeral, massive pyre, size of a ship, full-on ship. Baldur's wife, Nanna, when she sees her husband's body, she just dies of grief instantly. It's
outright.
over. Just outright dies.
She died of a broken heart.
Like, yeah. But instantly, her heart exploded out of her chest and she just dropped dead, kind of that intense grief.
Yeah.
None of this Star Wars bullshit. No. Emperor Palpatine fucking sucked Padmé's life away in order to...
She just died of childbirth.
Yeah, and that was...
She was choked previously and then went into labor.
Yeah, she could have just been like, but no, I refuse to believe Padmé Amidala, who at 18 years old could put on a body swap con to save her people from an unjust and illegal coup from a trading organization, went to the Jedi, spent the rest of her life as a politician, everything she did in the Clone Wars to die of a broken heart when she knows that her children are being born into a universe where the evil is winning and everything is collapsing. She would never have let that happen.
Died of a broken heart.
No.
They say it in the movie.
That droid is wrong. You know what? A lot of people say things. That doesn't make it canon. That just means that droid said that because...
Did they fly now, Darien?
They could always fly. It's like...
Well, it's canon because they fly now.
They have always been able to fly. It's like someone didn't watch the Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels.
No, literally. Anything that involves... Because these are based off of Mandalorians. They had jetpacks.
The Mandalorians have jetpacks. Listen... I can't. Let me talk about Baldur. The last thing I'll say on this is I refuse. I will never believe that Padmé Amidala died of a broken heart. Darth Sidious sucked her life force away to resurrect Darth Vader, who should have died. Anyway, speaking of people who should have died, Loki. No, Loki actually doesn't appear in the Baldr story for the rest of the time. Like Baldur, after he disappears, and what happens with Baldur,
I'm not gonna go near that.
We don't see Loki in connection with the Baldr story until the flighting happens, and this fucking egotistical
yeah, I did that. That was me.
Yeah, just wants to hurt Frigg, and it's like, oh, and now he's got everyone mad. Just confessed to doing the biggest crime that's ever been against him, and now they're like, oh, we're being mean? Cool, awesome, my fucking turn. So while everyone is putting on this massive, Thor even blesses the pyre with Mjolnir. This is a big deal.
Yeah.
While everyone else is doing this massive funeral, another god, Hermod, volunteered because Frigg asked, will anyone go to hell to try to reclaim Baldr? And he is the only one that was able to do it. Not because anyone else were afraid of stuff, but the grief of all the other Aesir were so overwhelming that they couldn't even bring themselves to reach out beyond this. He was the only one who could do it. So he actually takes Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse, and he rides down to hell, which is something we talked about in the last episode. And when he gets there, he does find Baldur, who is seated at a place of honor at Hell's table. And his wife is also there. And he says... basically I am here to get my brother back. He stayed there all night and in the morning asked Hel to let Baldur ride home with him, telling her of the deep sorrow and the wailing of the Aesir. But Hel answered that a test would be made to see whether Baldur was as loved as some would say. If all things in the world, alive or dead, weep for him, then he will be allowed to return to the Aesir. If anyone speaks against him or refuses to cry, then he will remain with Hel. When Hermod leaves, Baldur gives him a ring of his that he's send this to Odin as a token, and Nanna sends Frigg a linen robe. So there is interesting in examination, not something we get into a lot, but these nobility courtly politics, day-to-day life of what we can glean from what just everyday life and expectations, societal norms would have looked like for specifically the Icelandic people. Because again, we have Snorri's version of events and the elements that he is providing, which he was in Iceland, right? Yeah. And so it's not, we talk a lot about how Snorri being Christian would have very much influenced his interpretation of the way he presented the texts. And we see that in very specific and obviously very intentional ways. But I think it also it's cool to step back and acknowledge that this is also insight into the way Icelandic day-to-day culture, or at least an idealized version of it, right?
Mhm.
And so he goes and he recounts everything that happened to the Asgard. And then so all the Aesir send messages all throughout the world asking that Baldur be wept out of hell. All did so, people and animals, the earth, the stones, the trees, and all the metals, and the way you have seen things weep when they come out of freezing cold and into warmth. As the messengers, having accomplished this task, were returning home, they found a giantess sitting in a cave. She said her name was Thok. When they asked her to weep Baldur out of hell, she said, Thok will weep dry tears at Baldur's funeral pyre. Alive or dead, the old man's son gave me no joy. Let hell hold what she has.
Hate to see it.
Now, I said Loki doesn't appear again. That's not necessarily true.
Loki's not going to weep either.
People believe that the giantess was Loki, son of Laufey, the one who did the most harm to the Aesir.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's not, when we had Loki being present earlier, we were literally like, he changed his shape, he did this, he bounced around, and this one it's framed as differently.
Yeah.
Where the texts say that it is believed that this was Loki, and we don't necessarily know if that's true, and so it depends on how much you believe in the omniscient knowledge of the narrator. And in this text, remembering that the person speaking in the Gylfaginning right now is Hai, who is interpreted as one of these three aspects of Odin.
Mm-hmm.
You can assume that Odin probably knows exactly what he's talking about here.
Yeah, there's a very, very good chance. It's like, yeah, it was Loki. Guy's an asshole.
Yep. Then Galinir said, and this is, Loki is caught and the Aesir take their vengeance. Actually, I'll save that for a future episode. This episode is about Baldur.
Yes.
And that is the end of Baldur's story. Until Ragnarok, where he and Hod come back out after all things. But that's it. What's really interesting is that what Thok replies to them, what that line, is written in poetic verse.
So it's probably in the Poetic Edda, or in a poem somewhere.
Yes, exactly that. Thing is, in this one, no poem is given. There isn't, this is from this poem, which isn't so uncommon. There are sometimes you'll get that. So it is, sometimes we'll get like clearly a poetic reference, a passage, but it's not being cited as where it came from.
Yeah.
And so it's believed that this is probably, or very likely, from some lost poem that was about Baldur's death.
Yeah.
Where it gives us the details of how Hod killed his brother, but it was still Loki's being responsible and what actually happened. Because I think we talk about like, oh, that's not in the Edda, so Snorri made it up.
There's probably more. Snorri probably did have access to a lot more.
Yeah, more poems.
Than we know.
Yeah, these are just the poems that survived, right?
These are the poems that somebody found 200 years later.
Yeah, right. That's were recorded, written down, and managed to survive miraculously. Yeah. Because it's also like a lot of this was oral storytelling. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was probably oral storytelling that had been, in, like we talk about in Iceland, very specific versions of the myths that survived and were passed down. And so I will say that I think we've said this in the past, and probably something we'll say in the future. Like, and then Snorri got his hand on the ball. Here's what Snorri had to say about it.
But it's just, it's fun goofs and gads.
It's fun goofs and gads. To say that Snorri whole cloth invented everything that's not corroborated
everything
in the
that
Edda.
He's written.
Yeah.
Most likely not true.
Yes, that is a vast oversimplification of the reality of this complex situation that is Norse mythology. Well, we could certainly identify elements where Snorri's out here like, and evil men went to hell, and you're like, that's some Christianization there, Snor.
There's definitely some of that.
But this entire story we have of Loki and Baldur's immunity and Frigg and everything else, like that's not from the surviving Eddas, but it would be, like I said, an oversimplification to claim that Snorri just made all of that up here. He probably didn't. It probably is a story that he knew really well, and it is so important because the death of Baldur leads to Ragnarok. Like, Baldur's death is the point of Baldur's character in these stories, in this structure.
Yeah.
That it was probably a story that Snorri knew because he grew up hearing it. And so he wrote down the version that he knew and liked best. And that's important because if he wants you to write Icelandic poems that rely on illusion, you need to know this story because this is really important for you to be able to pull illusion from.
Yeah.
So that's something I just wanted to acknowledge a little bit because, like I said, most, if not all we have about Baldur really comes from Snorri. DJ.
What's up?
Why do you think Frigg did not get the oath from the mistletoe?
Honestly, again, from what I know, what the idea of mistletoe in my mind, seems like it'd be hard to fashion any sort of damaging weapon out of that.
That's true, but one could argue that grass and pine cones, dirt.
Yeah, but there's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Seemed like there was only one bush.
Yeah. It is. I remember hearing this story the first time I heard it, and the way it's often framed is that Frigg either forgot about the mistletoe, or in this case, obviously this one I just read, she fully knows that I didn't ask for the mistletoe's oath because it's too young.
Yeah.
And that another interpretation I have often heard is that Frigg just didn't think it was important, didn't think it was dangerous. Like you said, DJ, It's not enough to actually cause any harm. Which I would argue is a wild interpretation. Not that you're wrong, but just wild when you know who Frigg is as a character. Obviously, not the Frigg episode, but she is Odin's wife. Yeah. And she is incredibly wise and intelligent in her own rights. In poems in the Poetic Edda, in the Lay of Grimnir, she and Odin get into an argument about whether or not this mortal king who Odin favors is actually a good person. And Frigg is like, no, he's not. And she is right. So sometimes she is even wiser than Odin occasionally. And the idea that she, on this quest to save her son, would think something, anything, would not take any opportunity to cover all of her bases, I think misses the point of Frigg. And DJ, I want to tell you a little bit more. Now, this is a section that I have titled MistleFOE.
Okay.
I would like to present with you an interpretation proposed by Meryl Kaplan, who is an associate professor of English and Dramatic Languages and Literature and a director of the Scandinavian program, Ohio State University.
Okay.
So, this woman knows what she's talking about. And in 2012, Kaplan published News from Other Worlds, Studies in Nordic Folklore, Mythology, and Culture, in honor of John F. Lindo, who's someone we've mentioned in the past. This is also a dude who knows a lot about mythology. It's in honor of him because he was actually one of her mentors. This publication is actually a series of essays, including Kaplan's essay, Once More on the Mistletoe. I've read this essay. I managed to get my hands on it so I could read the damn thing. Yay! In this one, Kaplan looks very, very specifically at Snorri's word usage and how he says young. And she argues that young in this context doesn't mean non-threatening, but it's actually being used as a legal classification for the Icelandic Commonwealth. So the Icelandic Commonwealth, which is like Iceland at a certain period of time. Iceland at a time when these stories were, when Snorri was writing down, right? We have a collection of laws that were active. These were the laws of the land at the time. It's called the Gragras or the Grey Goose laws. Why is it called that? Don't know. This episode isn't about that. We have to keep moving forward. In these laws, it is stated that a man may enter pledges when he is 16 winters old.
Okay.
Frigg might be saying that the mistletoe is literally
brand
too young to enter into a legally binding oath.
I'm gonna be honest. Maybe I should have said that. I did think, wow, is it really like, it's like 2 years old? It's brand new. Yeah. That's weird. Anyway.
Yeah. So, and that is a baffling thing to include. But the idea of something being too young to enter an oath is actually a fairly common thing in the Icelandic sagas. There are several boys whose fathers are slain, sometimes before the boy himself is even born. Mm-hmm. And it is known that they will be a threat to the slayer when these boys have reached adulthood, right? this is wild. Bear with me, listeners. I think this is so interesting. So there are actually laws in place to deal in the Icelandic Commonwealth that are meant to be dealt with how you go about resolving conflict surrounding murder. Because the base reproach would be like, well, this person killed this person. So this person's next of kin is going to kill that guy. And then that guy's next of kin will kill the avenger. And then you have constant bloodshed. So there are laws in place in this time that are meant to like, hey, this is how we're going to settle it, right? And it tiptoes around the idea that any blood can be bought, but there were laws that were trying to be like, oh, right, well, how do we keep this from being a constant cycle? Because that's no good to society. Yeah. And usually the settlement is handled by, if a man is killed, his next male kin will deal with it. So oftentimes his son, his father. And in the event that it usually would go to the son, right? Now, if the son is too young to enter any legal proceedings, then it would be the man's brother, father, uncle. If he had no one on his side, maybe his wife's father would deal with it, right? Like someone else would be the one that would step in and settle it. So there were ways that, okay, we got it settled. Things are good. But the son never actually entered into this agreement. The son could not, like, even though it was handled, there is this sense of foreshadowing, this understanding that it was dealt with, but maybe not, because the son never entered into that vow to not come for revenge.
Yeah.
Kaplan acknowledged that settlement can never be unanimous. And she argues that that is actually what this cultural, legal reality is what Snorri was intentionally invoking when he described the mistletoe as being too young.
Okay.
There are lots of things that could have been said about, like, Frigg literally didn't know about the mistletoe. Something was new. She tried to find something but couldn't find it. Like, there are lots of other ways that there could have been one vulnerability to Baldr that Loki could have exploited. But the language of Frigg saying it was too young to enter into an oath, Kaplan argues specifically evokes this reality that in, like, what the audience would have understood as having the potential for, quote, society to unravel from the weak point. And in the sense, like, it's the Baldr and the mistletoe is a reflection of Icelandic law. There is a threat of violence. The Aesir come together and legally all vow no more violence. Frigg goes and gets vows from everyone saying no more violence. But this young being cannot enter into this legal contract. And the concern isn't that the mistletoe is young, but that it will not be young forever. That sons may be young now, but it's not that they're not a threat today, it's that they could be a threat tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so that actually may be what the mistletoe in Snorri's version of the Baldr tale is literally doing. And I thought that was really cool.
That's fun.
Right?
Yeah,
I thought that was super interesting. So you remember earlier when I talked about how you can see, like, the way Snorri writes that is giving us an insight into, like, Icelandic, like, culture and society? Yeah. That was foreshadowing for me to talk about this.
That's neat. That's a lot of fun.
So the last thing I wanted to address regarding Baldr in mythology is this idea of Baldr as, quote, Norse Jesus. Have you ever heard this before?
I was thinking of it this episode.
Yeah?
Like, yeah, you probably could be.
Yeah.
You know?
So that is...
One can make the argument that Jesus' like death and the way he died is, well, by spear.
And a lot of other things you would say.
A couple of other things, but, you know, spear is one of them. And, what is it?
Actually,
could lead
I
to
don't...
the events of what Rapture technically is.
Yeah, I think... I don't have a copy of the Bible. I actually think the spear came about to confirm he was dead. I think it was the crucifixion specifically.
Okay.
That killed Jesus. I think he was stabbed with the spear, but I think it was someone confirming he was dead. But I could be wrong.
I wouldn't doubt it, but I just know water came from it, and a lot of people were stunned by that.
Yes, I will acknowledge that I am not as versed, strongly detailed verse with the story of the crucifixion beyond things. It has been many, many years since I went through the signs of the cross. What is it? Do you remember that? You were too young when we went to Catholic school.
I mean, I remember it.
It is the days leading up to Easter, and you just had to do all the the 12 and everyone anyway.
Yeah,
Not what this episode is about. So that's something I see a lot when I was just people like, oh, like could be interpreted as like called Norse Jesus but like it's the kind of thing that people say because it seems like someone else said it, so they're just gonna, when talking about Baldr, also say that.
Yeah.
But has, like, I would argue, no basis. Now you might think when I say this, oh, is it Snorri leaning into his Christian beliefs in relaying this tale?
Baldur didn't die for anyone's sins.
That's the thing.
That's the
thing.
crux of Jesus's death, is he like saw and was like, yeah, okay, and forgave everyone's sins by sacrificing himself.
Yes, that is the crux of this claim. I really couldn't find exactly where it came from, but the idea probably comes from medieval Christian scholars who read the Baldr story and then accused it of essentially being just a bastardization of Jesus. Like they were accusing the Norse of copying, which timeline-wise, no. I mean, it could have, but no. And I don't...
No, chances are low.
Yep, I think some will try to argue that, and some very wildly incorrectly will try to argue that the story of Jesus it was inspired by the Baldr tale, which also know that timeline doesn't timeline.
I mean, isn't there like actual evidence that Jesus was a real ass person?
Yes, but you also have like this historical person, and then people.
Oh yeah, inspired. I like that.
But the elements like that also just wouldn't work because these stories were not older than the events that led to Christianity.
Yeah.
So it's like it's like, oh, here's a beloved deity who's the son of the almighty ruler who dies and then later returns to life and then will rule over all after their resurrection.
The reason behind the death is kind of important to both of their stories.
Exactly.
You can't just be like, here's similarities, so they must be the same.
Exactly.
There's got to be like the intent behind this shit.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, both of those have these ideas, but like how those ideas were incorporated are vastly different. Like Baldur's death is tragedy. It leads to the end of all things. Jesus' death is meant to be viewed as celebration for what had happened. It leads to the start of new things, right?
Yeah.
Why it happened, things that happened, it was done in trickery. Well, this was done. Like, it is just... Yeah, gang, so I don't know if you listeners, you ever encounter someone's like, oh yeah, it's like Norse Jesus. It's like it's not for a lot of reasons. But the main one being, as DJ just said, the cause of death, and not just literally the cause of death, but the reason, what these deaths serve in their perspective, the story structure, what the reader who is encountering these tales are meant to take away and understand from these events are just not the same thing.
Yeah.
And that is what I have on Baldr. DJ, you mentioned Assassin's Creed earlier.
Nope.
No, you didn't. You mentioned God of War earlier.
God of War.
Assassin's Creed's just top of my list.
Oh, is it? Baldur shows... I guess I haven't played
Assassin's Creed Valhalla, yeah.
Yeah. For those of you who haven't played it, much like myself, but this is something I kind of understood from watching other people play it and just kind of having the understanding of the game. Mm-hmm. Baldur's actually the main antagonist of the first game.
Mm-hmm.
And he shows up real early because he has heard that you... Kratos, slayer of the Greek pantheon, thing tumbled after he got done with it. He figured that you would be able to break his curse.
Yeah. But not just because you killed I read about this, not just he's killed the pantheon, because he thinks Kratos is someone specific who has the capacity to do that. Kratos is not. That person has already died.
Tricks him, yeah. And so he goes and you just kick the shit out of him. But you don't win, obviously, because it's fucking Baldr.
Baldr can't even feel anything.
No, he doesn't.
You want to elaborate on what the curse is in this context?
If I remember correctly, it's just he can't feel anything or die. Mm-hmm. Like, and nothing. He can't feel anything, period.
This was to prevent him from the fear of him dying. I think they use Freya.
I think it's
Freya. She cast a spell to protect her son, but it is too much, and he literally, like,
he was crazy.
Feel anything, not just pain. He can't feel anything. Yeah. This does not put him in a good mental state. I will say that
this man is unstable.
Yes, having a bad time.
Yeah. So it's really funny because I read that Magni and Modi show up.
Yeah,
that's funny.
They're
here. That's just fun, and I need to play this game. I still do.
It sounded fun.
At some point you find out it's mistletoe that breaks it.
Can I tell you how I know this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I know this one specifically because the Best Days video game podcast, they do a Patreon, and they did a bracket of the best twists in video games, and they talked about this one.
Uh-huh.
So Kratos' adopted son, name escapes me. Don't know this boy's
It's
name.
not adopted. It's his actual.
It's his
son.
actual kid.
Yeah,
Oh, I thought he
Asterius.
was adopted.
No. He had
I
a
thought
wife.
his kid died.
The start of the first God of War 2018. He ended up killing his other wife and kids
Yeah. He
in
had
the
a Hercules.
in the first trilogy.
Yeah.
But in this one, the start is you building a funeral pile for your wife, and Asterius is your real ass son.
I mean, listen, real son, not what I meant. I just thought he was adopted, not biological.
It's a biological son, not adopted. This is his son.
At some point in time, he gets like the Lord of the Rings. He gets the thing the Fellowship has that keeps their. He's got like that, but it's mistletoe. He's got like a little mistletoe fucking enamel pin, like he's just running around with. And then towards the end, Baldr hits him and he goes flying. And Kratos runs to him and he sees like blood all over his chest. He's like, "Oh my god!" And his son croaks out, "Not my blood." Because it's not his blood. It's Baldur's blood because he hit him, and it was because of the mistletoe. So that's how they find out mistletoe can kill him.
Heck yeah. Big fan.
Big fan. And then they do.
Yeah, they fashion the mistletoe onto an arrow.
Mm-hmm. And Baldr dies laughing.
Well, yeah, he gets hit with the thing, and then you're
and
able
then
to
you can kill him. Yeah, because it breaks the curse.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I can feel it, and he wants to feel pain.
Yeah,
he's just goes full masochist and just ignores everything. And he goes for it. And then it kicks off the events of Ragnarok, which is the second game.
Yep. We've got Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which neither of us have played it. I don't know I somehow know way more about God of War 2018 than I do Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But what I learned, which I didn't know, but is wild, you probably knew this. So Baldur is a dude, right? Not a deity, except for the way that all of the gods are deities because
quote unquote deities because they're eating a golden apple pretty much.
Because they're all they are the Isu, a hyper advanced ancient humanoid species.
Oh wait.
That like Athena.
This actually does show up in Odyssey too. Yeah.
So
like Mercury and Persephone are all these fucking things.
So Baldur is part of that. And his actual like story became larger over time, but he did die. Odin tries to get him back. And at one point in time in the story, you are seeing events through Odin's eyes, and he gets to Baldr in hell, and Baldur's like, I can't come back. That's not how it's supposed to be. And you have to go. And apparently this has happened a bunch of times, because he keeps making Odin forget, and then Odin, like, accepts it, and then doesn't. But yeah, I was like, yeah, he's in there. He's a cool dude who's trying to, help do his best, even though he's dead. It's wild.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of video games... Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, I was about to say too. Baldur's Gate. Not actually anything to do with Baldur.
Not actually. This
dude's name is Baldurin, and he's a big adventurer. He's a famous adventurer. Had a bunch of money.
Yeah.
Started the town of Baldur's Gate, small harbor town.
Yeah.
Went out to adventure.
Never came back.
Who knows?
Who knows?
And Baldur's Gate
built a wall
just
around
expanded.
the harbor town. Yeah. Yeah, he built a wall around this little harbor town that would eventually be called Baldur's Gate. Yeah, that's it. His name wasn't even Baldur.
No, it was Baldurin.
Yeah, and it just became shorter. Yeah, that's it. As far as I can tell, it has because it's a D&D. It's part of the Forgotten Realms.
Yeah.
What you would, if you were not a D&D person, you would probably recognize as D&D world.
Yeah.
Right? And so it wouldn't be, and in D&D world, there are gods. Some of them are created whole cloth for this world, and some are straight up the god Pan, right? So
yep, Pan.
You can have gods who exist in like these real world pantheons. So it would not be unreasonable to assume that Baldur's Gate, this location, was named after in some way Baldur the Norse deity, but it's just not.
It's not even spelled the same.
It's not even spelled the same. Oh, I mean, you'll see a lot of different spellings of Baldur, honestly.
I haven't really seen the UR, though.
Maybe I've only seen it in Baldur's Gate, and that's why my brain... Yeah, it's usually ER.
It's either ER or just R.
But
I think maybe once I saw it as AR.
Baldur, yeah.
Maybe once.
So yeah, that is... it has nothing to do with Baldur's Gate, but the game came out last year, and it's super popular, so I felt like we gotta at least acknowledge.
Yeah, that company's like, we're not doing this anymore.
It's so good.
We worked really hard, almost went under. We're done. We're done with these kinds of games for a bit.
That's fair. That was what I understand. An incredible game that I will never play because I know if I do, it would consume me entirely, and I just can't I just can't. I have to let myself do other things.
I'll get it for you eventually.
No!
I'll probably put it on your account on the PlayStation. Be like, hey, go at it if you ever want to fucking check it out.
No, because that's all my life will be. And
Exactly,
I have,
yeah,
DJ, I
it'd
do
be funny.
3 goddamn podcasts and I'm writing a book.
But like, you have a sense of responsibility.
I don't,
You do.
Davis.
You do.
You've never seen me hyperfixate.
You have a sense of responsibility that you get stuff
Because
done when you need to.
Because I don't let myself get sucked into the things that'll destroy me.
No, it'll be fine.
DJ's out here shoving mistletoe down my throat.
It'll just be straight up. You'll come home one day and there's just going to be the game box from like GameStop on the thing.
A box. I love having a game in a box and a disc.
The disc is a classic.
DJ, do you know about Baldr and other things?
Not off the top of my head.
I had to do some digging.
He hasn't shown up in Smite. Probably shown up in Smite lore because obviously we got like Jormungandr, Hel, Loki, Thor, Odin, right? We got all these people. Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
It's one of those things, right, where it's like, yeah, Baldr, he's big, but like maybe not big enough you see him all the time. He appears in name or reference or motif in like various things, not things that I have encountered or engaged with enough to like really feel like talking about them here would be super interesting. I ended up doing a deep dive into the Witches of East End book series by Melissa de la Cruz, wherein you have these witches who have been around since like the time of Salem, and they are immortal, but they've also been like forbidden from being able to use their powers for XYZ reasons. And you think that enough would be the plots. But then you find out that they're actually all essentially reincarnated Norse deities.
Okay.
And then one of the characters' love interests turn out to be Loki and Baldr. And they're both trying to like destroy the realms, basically. They both can't be trusted.
Okay.
And that's it. That's all I have for you there. I was just fascinated when I stumbled upon it. And I like deep dive, and I read the synopsis for the first 2 books, and then I could not find a synopsis for the third one. I just found the, back of the book dust jacket, but I couldn't find what actually happened. So I don't actually know what happens, but it's pretty great. I think Baldur's supposed to maybe be a good guy, but he may turn out to have been sketchy all along because his name is not mentioned on the dust jacket of the 3rd book. So I don't know. I do know.
How to get rid of him.
I do know that Baldr is in Marvel Comics. As I mentioned in the last episode, how he is a Norse god. One point in time, he has to like prove himself. Odin's being like kind of a dick about it because there was a fight that Baldr wasn't at because he was helping get a bird back into its nest.
Mm-hmm.
And so Odin is gonna like kill him and attacks him, and Baldr just doesn't flinch. That's when Odin, like basically something like that. And Odin's like, all right, you're super brave. You weren't acting in cowardice. Okay, never mind. You were acting in kindness. So Baldr's great. He does eventually die because, of course, it's Baldr, and then he's in hell and da-da-da, whatever. I mentioned last episode that the last thing I knew that Baldr ended up where he was ruling hell.
Okay.
Because Angela had overthrown Hela and kicked her out, and then just cooked the crown long enough to get her girlfriend out of there, and then put Baldr in charge, and then skipped town.
Yeah.
Or Hela comes back and she wants her throne. There's a big war. They're dealing with a fire demon guy. So it's a lot. Like, it's one of these massive, like, overarching events for Marvel, right? And so, like, okay, we need to combine factions. So it's decided that Hel and Baldr will get married, right? And this will be like a wedding of, like, it'll be a political wedding of unity, right? Yeah. And then at the ceremony, they assert the fire demon attacks. They actually beat him. And afterwards, Hela's like, this wedding doesn't stand because Baldr never said his vows. Baldr doesn't want to marry Hela also. Like, he's not jazzed about this. Then enters Karnilla. Now, I don't know how I missed Karnilla when I was scanning through things in the Hela wiki for the last episode. But let me tell you about Karnilla. She's often an antagonist, but she's in love with Baldr. And they've been on again, off again for a long time. And she rolls up here in this last thing. She takes the wedding ring, puts it on her finger, and she says the vows. And she takes Baldr's place.
Nice.
So she and Hela are married now.
Okay.
They are wives ruling, they are co-rulers of Hel.
Okay.
And this serves the same purpose to whatever political unity they wanted to do. And then as Queen of Hel, Karnilla is able to send Baldr back to the living world.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And then the next time we see Baldr is in War of the Realms Journey into Mystery 2019, which was a 5-issue comic event series written by the McElroy family of the Adventure Zone.
That's
and my brother
sick.
and brother B, but also Clint was there. So the Adventure Zone. And in this one, Baldr is his little sister who, oh God, no, I can't get into that. It's just he hires a bunch of superheroes to babysit his little sister because demons are trying to attack her, because she's also a demon sometimes. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
And so that's the last time we've seen Baldr, is he's trying to he was on this cross-country trip with Miles Morales and Kate Bishop, and just, it's so fun. I recommend this. It was such a fun comic. It was so silly. They've got Ares on their tail the whole time. It's wild.
Nice.
But that's Baldr in the Marvel comics, where he is, last I checked, not in hell, but also that was 5 years ago, so I don't know how our boy's doing. Hopefully great.
Yeah.
But who's to say?
It's Marvel.
I don't know.
It's Marvel in the last 5 years.
Yeah, well, any comic, it's been 5 years since you checked in, you'd be shocked.
Yeah.
I don't know how Kamala Khan's doing, and I'm afraid to ask. Actually, I do know how she's doing, and I'm still mad about it.
That's
I mean,
fair.
my girl's doing great now.
Oh,
but
good.
She's a mutant. She's having the best. Well, listen, the mutants are having a really rough time in the comics right now, but Kamala's, she's going to do her best.
Yeah.
And that is Baldr.
Yeah. I can't think of anything else.
No, I think that is it. Dear listeners, if we've missed a really great example of Baldr in media, a great interpretation, absolutely hit us up. We are on Instagram. You can send us an email at musesandmythology@gmail.com. You can also talk to us and lots of other cool folks directly on our Discord, which you can join by supporting us on Patreon. Patreon.com/musesandmythology. DJ, go off.
Patreon.com/musesandmythology. We got a lot of wonderful content over there. We got Muse Myths 2 years running, where we have talked about a bunch of retellings of A Christmas Carol. We have about the same amount of bonus episodes as we do main feed episodes.
Which means for $5 a month, you get double the amount of content you
Yes.
currently have.
Yep. And for $10 a month, you get access to our Remyth episodes, which are just a lot of fun. We talk about other myths that we see throughout modern pop culture outside of Rick Riordan's works.
Yeah, it's like this little roundup we do at the end of like, oh yeah, this character is mentioned here and here, but we actually take that and do a really big deep dive. The most recent one that just came out for Pride for June was Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles.
Yep.
If you skipped over the garden, our Muse Around the Garden section, you may have missed it, but hey, Darien finally read Song of Achilles, and I brought on special guest to come talk about it with me, and the episode's almost 2 hours long, broke down and really talked about and analyzed. It's really one of my favorite episodes I've gotten done for the podcast. I'm sorry DJ wasn't there, because I think you could have bought a cool thing, but you hadn't listened to it yet, and I really wanted to get out in time for you. So,
no, I don't blame you.
But for $5 a month, and that's the tier you get double the amount of content is currently available for Muses. The Bunker 9 episodes, including the most recent one, wherein we rated all of the Riordanverse books based on vibes.
Based on vibes and the vibe of what we could remember.
Yes, vibes. And also their cover. DJ, before we started, went downstairs, got all of my books off my bookshelves, brought them on, stacked them on the bed so we could also analyze them by cover.
Yep.
And that was a trip. That sounds fun. And also,
Chalice of the Gods is a dog shit cover.
Wow, just coming out hot. I would perhaps say I don't care much for it.
I hate that cover.
But TJ's feeling spicy. I'll admit it, we get way spicier over on the Patreon.
Yep.
So if you want to do that, you want to hang out with us and a bunch of really cool folks on the Discord. Owls have gotten really big. I don't know if you've noticed this, DJ. We've transitioned from bears and have gotten really into owls over on the Discord. So if you want to share pictures of and videos of cool owls and talk about other cool myth stuff, Lore Olympus, rap, we talked about that, things like that. Patreon.com/musesandmythology. Support us there. Join the Discord. Let us know what you think and what else and why I should play Baldur's Gates.
Yep. Thank you guys so much for listening.
We'll be back in your ears on Tuesday, July 16th to talk about MistleFOE. But until then, don't be like Zeus.
Don't be like Zeus.
Muses of Mythology is created and hosted by Darien and DJ Smart. It's edited by Darien Smart. The show is produced by Darien and DJ Smart, as well as
Tim O'Connor, The Crystal Conman, Nicholas Miller. Our music is Athens Festival by Martin Hain. And our cover art is by Audrey Miller. You can find her on Instagram at bombshellnutshellart.
Want more Muses of Mythology? Support the show on Patreon. Just $1 gets you exclusive bonus content. Get more at patreon.com/Muses of Mythology.
You can also support the show by leaving a review at lovethepodcast.com/Muses of Mythology, or tell a friend why you love the show.
Don't forget to check out all of our episodes and episode transcripts at musesofmythology.com.
Thanks for listening.